Putin is attempting to hide his war crimes by rebuilding from the ruins of Mariupol, removing every piece of evidence by rebuilding Mariupol. The recent rebuilding in Mariupol is Putin's cover-up on his war crimes. Mariupol is a city in Donetsk Oblast, Ukraine. It is situated on the northern coast Priazovia of the Sea of Azov, at the mouth of the Kalmius River. Prior to the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, it was the 10th largest city in the country and the second largest city in Donetsk Oblast. Don't think whatever happened to Cain won't happen to Putin and the land of Russia along with its ally.
Genesis 4, verses 9 to 14. Adonai said to Cain, "Where is Hevel your brother?" And he replied, "I don't know. Am I my brother's guardian?" He said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. Now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood at your hands. When you farm the ground, it will no longer yield its strength to you. You will be a fugitive, wandering the earth." Cain said to Adonai, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. You are banning me today from the land and from your presence. I will be a fugitive wandering the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me."
This is a clear message to Putin: you are a fugitive wandering the earth, and whoever finds you kill you. The blood of innocents in Mariupol is crying out to God. Don't think your sin of the horrible crimes you committed at Mariupol. You will not and never escape from it by covering up with new buildings. Blood of 23,000 is crying out. The reason for Russia's invasion of Ukraine was clear. Moscow wanted strategic depth. Nothing Russia has done since, however, has been clear. The military has suffered several reversals, but this alone is not unexpected. Reversals are part of war, and prudent commanders anticipate and respond to them. Ideally, the responses are meant to solve or at least mitigate the problem as the war continues. Moscow is behaving as if the challenges it faces are a surprise. Russia assumed from the beginning that it would bring overwhelming force to bear on a much weaker military. The expectation was that the Ukrainian military would fragment and thus be unable to offer much resistance. Moscow thought Ukraine believed the same. That the Kremlin was wrong isn't the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is that the Russian command structure, starting at the top with Vladimir Putin, didn't banish their confidence. An invading force should be built on the assumption it is dealing with a powerful and motivated enemy, and that it needs to prepare for a tough war. Meanwhile, Russia also did not expect the sheer amount of aid and weaponry the United States would send. It saw the U.S. as too disjointed politically and socially and with too strong an opposition to make much of a difference. The Russians have been very effective in waging psychological warfare as a key dimension of combat and engaged, as was reasonable, in creating division over the war in the United States. Moscow believed the U.S. would see the fall of Ukraine and the deployment of Russian troops to NATO's eastern frontier as a potential recipe for another Cold War. Washington would probably want to respond but would be too fragmented to do so. Or so the Russian thinking went. These failures were evident from the outset of the war. Russia deployed 3 armored formations to break Ukrainian resistance, which it believed would be far inferior and isolated from American assistance. Neither was the case. The Russians were blocked by logistics problems of their own, as well as Javelin anti-tank missiles. Russian tanks froze in place or made little progress. With the Ukrainians emboldened, the Russians were forced to re-evaluate their adversary. But it seems as though they changed their tactics without changing their opinion of their enemy. Though they consolidated their forces in Donbass and fought an extended battle for control there, they didn't advance to western Ukraine. They simply retreated toward their own border. This was a crucial moment for Russia. It was clear that the Ukrainians were a significant and coherent fighting force, and it was clear that the United States was not going to limit its support, even as the Poles intensified the training of Ukrainians. All the while, both tactical and strategic intelligence mapped Russian forces and anticipated Russian moves. In many cases, Ukrainian forces were able to attack Russian forces at the most vulnerable point or retreat when Russian offensives appeared too costly. It was at this point that the Russians should have reevaluated their likelihood of success. Offensive operations had had only limited success. The Ukrainian force outnumbered the Russian force and fought with discipline, while U.S. resupply, and intelligence flowed. Russia retained enough potential power to alarm the West, power it ought to have used to seek peace through negotiations. In other words, Russia should have followed German Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt's advice about what should be done near the end of World War II. His answer: make peace, you fools. Given the confidence with which the initial attack was launched, making peace was unthinkable. All the dead, all the confidence, all of the well-spoken politicians would have been seen as a fraud. Putin has sought to turn the war from a Russian invasion to an American invasion of Russia. He has threatened nuclear war. He has mobilized truculent thousands, who may be trained by the end of winter, or perhaps never. The most difficult part of a war is ending it without victory. The United States suffered through this in Vietnam. It is the wars that appear to be easy that are sometimes the hardest to fight, and always the hardest to concede. No one doubted, in Russia or America. Neither Russia nor the United States thought it could lose in Afghanistan. It is an odd thing about confidence. Within the confines of reality, confidence is essential to fight a war. The hardest war to fight is the one in which the commander thinks victory is a given. When Russia started the war, it believed the mere sight of Russian tanks would scatter the Ukrainian army. Every reversal since has been dismissed by Moscow as simply an accident of war. Instead of what it was, a war begun with certainty now confronting the reality of an enemy force superior to its own. Concern can be productive. Denial of war crimes by Putin is the preface to desire. In war, the continued denial of reality is deadly. Putin is responsible because he is the president. That the general staff and intelligence services share the blame. What has happened in Ukraine is a systemic breakdown of leadership that lead Russia into a poorly understood war, insisting that victory is just around the corner if it simply holds the line. Wars like this usually end in political deaths. Vietnam finished Lyndon B. Johnson, World War to the Japanese and German regimes. The pivotal question is, what makes Russia think it can win next week when it hasn't won in 7 months? There is sometimes an answer to that kind of question, but Russian politicians are now laying blame on others for the failure. Making peace sounds easy to those who didn't start the war. The recent rebuilding in Mariupol is Putin's cover-up on his war crimes. Mariupol is a city in Donetsk Oblast, Ukraine. It is situated on the northern coast Priazovia of the Sea of Azov, at the mouth of the Kalmius River. Prior to the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, it was the 10th largest city in the country and the 2nd largest city in Donetsk Oblast, with an estimated population of 425,681 people in January 2022. However, Mariupol has been militarily controlled by Russia since May 2022, and the city's residents are now estimated to number around 100,000, according to Ukrainian authorities. Russia destroyed 1,300 buildings in Mariupol without removing bodies of residents, Mariupol Mayor Vadim Bochenko claimed that Russian soldiers occupying the devastated Mariupol city have destroyed nearly 1,300 high-rise apartment buildings. As the brutal Russian war in Ukraine, the Ukrainian mayor of Mariupol, Vadim Bochenko, claimed that Russian soldiers occupying the devastated Mariupol city have destroyed nearly 1,300 high-rise apartment buildings without properly removing hundreds of dead remains trapped beneath the wreckage. Taking to the city council's telegram, Mariupol mayor said, "The real number of bodies under the rubble of destroyed houses is frightening. Almost 50 to 100 people were killed. Of destroyed houses is frightening. Almost 50 to 100 people were killed under almost every destroyed house, and 300 high-rise buildings were destroyed in Mariupol." Bochenko, who fled Mariupol for a Ukrainian-controlled area, also added, citing citizens within the city. Initially, the occupiers involved Mariupol residents in dismantling the rubble carefully. However, according to Bochenko, when the Russians discovered the true number of victims under the debris, they promptly moved the locals. In addition to this, Bochenko went on to say that since building destruction has been done indiscriminately, the dead bodies of Mariupol citizens killed in the conflict have been dumped in the same landfill as the concrete debris. 23,000 Mariupol citizens were slain during the conflict, whereas Mariupol Mayor Bochenko, that the actual number of individuals slain in the city may be far higher than what they have reported. Mariupol, which has been momentarily seized by invading Russia, is suffering from one of the nation's worst humanitarian disasters. The city was nearly completely devastated by the enemy's shelling. Electricity, water, and gas are now inaccessible in Mariupol. The current reconstruction at Mariupol is a Putin's cover-up on his war crimes committed. He is going to be prosecuted.
Genesis 9, verses 5-7 I will certainly demand an accounting for the blood of your lives. I will demand it from every animal and from every human being. I will demand from every human being an accounting for the life of his fellow human being. Whoever sheds human blood, by a human being will his own blood be shed. For God made human beings in his image, and you people, be fruitful, multiply, swarm on the earth and multiply on it. Ezekiel 22, verses 3-4 say that Adonai Elohim says, city that sheds blood within yourself, thus speeding your own doom, and that makes idols for yourself that defile you. You are guilty because of the blood you have shed, you are defiled by your idols that you have made. You have shortened your days, you have completed your years. Therefore I have made you an object of scorn for the nations, and a laughingstock for every country.
Don't think whatever happened to Cain won't happen to Putin and the land of Russia along with its ally.
Genesis 4, verses 9-14 Adonai said to Cain, where is Hevel your brother? And he replied, I don't know, am I my brother's guardian? He said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. Now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood at your hands. When you farm the ground, it will no longer yield its strength to you. You will be a fugitive, wandering the earth. Cain said to Adonai, my punishment is greater than I can bear. You are banning me today from the land and from your presence. I will be a fugitive wandering the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me.
This is a clear message to Putin: you are a fugitive wandering the earth, and whoever finds you kill you. The blood of innocents in Mariupol is crying out to God. Don't think your sin of the horrible crimes you committed at Mariupol. You will not and never escape from it by covering up with new buildings. Blood of 23,000 is crying out from beneath the earth. Report brought to you by Messianic News Cast. Click like to this video. You can subscribe to our channel or hit the notification bell for more news on this channel. And remember, Yeshua is real.